Welcome to the You Are Covered podcast. Hey, I'm Hannah Lynn Miller, and I am your host. I'm so glad that you're joining me. Today, we are going to talk about a really important topic. I think I say that every single episode, but this one is something that I'm super passionate about. And, I feel like I've been tackling these topics that are just kind of difficult to talk about. And I am always wanting to just start the podcast off saying, this is my opinion. This does not reflect all therapists. This does not reflect all Christian therapy. I just want to make sure that we're all comfy, That is the mental health counselor in me. But as we talk about the role of faith-based counseling in mental health, and as we talk about this, you may be clicking on this episode because you're just curious. Maybe you are a Christian and you're like, I just don't understand the role that counseling plays in somebody's life. Maybe you're a mental health skeptic. Maybe you are a faith skeptic as well. That could be a thing. You could be like, I just don't think that there's any place for that. And you know what? I totally get that. And I so respect that opinion. I have struggled with that myself many times. There's a couple of things that have changed for me when I have talked about or processed faith-based counseling. When I write it out, there's definitely a lot of different ways that you can describe incorporating faith, religion, Christianity, all the things into a counseling session. There's definitely different ways to say. You could just say Christian counseling, and that would be a lot more specific. The reason I do like faith-based counseling, just because it can be a lot more specific to what integrated counseling looks like. And that is kind of what I was trained in at Moody. That was where I got my master's. And so I enjoy the term faith-based counseling because I think too, you could use other faith backgrounds in a counseling practice as well. So I think it's still a lot more clinical, like a clinical term, but a lot of times faith-based is related towards Christian community faith background. So I just wanted to start that off. The other thing that I do want to talk about is that I take people's belief systems and faith and spirituality very seriously in the counseling practice. I think it's extremely unethical to approach counseling as this is my time to kind of put my own beliefs on someone else. Ethically, it's just not appropriate. It's really, really, really damaging for an individual. I think it's just horrible. I kind of just hate it because I hate even having to say that, but that is kind of how I want to start this off because it is extremely unethical to force your belief on someone else who's coming to you for mental health counseling. And there's just a lot of things, and I, would love to keep talking about the ethics of counseling. And so I just want to start that off. Even when, in intake, we usually have a part of the intake that asks the question, how important is your faith to therapy, faith and spirituality in the therapy process? And if somebody says it's extremely important, I still want to make sure that person's taken care of. I want to make sure that they are the ones who are comfortable with the speed or the content or what we're talking about. So I always start off my first session, even if I know that person is a Christian or came in from the referral was in a faith community or a church, and that's how they found us. I want to make sure that they know, and I always say this, I will take your lead on all things spiritual. So if you want more prayer in a session, cool, I'm down with that. but you need to tell me. Or if you want more, I don't know, theology and Bible, I'm down with that. I got a degree in it. Totally can do that. But I want that individual with their journey and their experiences to lead those sessions, not my beliefs and my experiences. And it can be challenging because it is a very personal topic, I think, for the individual in the therapy session. And I don't know what that person's been through until they unpack that with me and I can see a little bit more of like what they're sharing. And even then, I still don't know to the extent of what has been happening or what has happened or their experiences or even how they experience God. So with that all in mind, that is the topic that we are going to jump into today. And just to give you a little bit of background, I wrote a blog post on my website, so you can check it out at hannahlynnmiller.com. And it is a whole blog post on what faith-based counseling is and the foundations of it and the benefits. And I just wanted to do like a really like brief general overview. And like I said, you can still use faith-based counseling as more of a clinical thing. So it could encompass other religions if that is what people would want to use. For me and my community, when I say faith-based counseling, it's usually grounded in Christian principles. That's my background. That's usually the communities that come to me for therapy. So with all that being said, again, a client is going to always lead with their belief system. I am going to learn from them and let you lead that process in therapy, what it looks like. So when we talk about faith-based and when we talk about a holistic approach, again, I would always want the client to lead in that area, in that arena. But I do think, and there is a lot of studies that in psychology that show that using faith-based counseling, using spirituality and using something like the term is like a higher power, right? And talking about that with your clients can be really, really beneficial. And that's what this blog post is about. It's, again, what I said is a very general way to describe faith-based counseling from a clinical perspective. And that's kind of what I'm going to share in this podcast, but it's going to be a little bit more personal because, listen, I am a human. I do come at this counseling stuff with my own background, with my own experiences. I can't separate the humanness from the therapy as well. So this is going to be more from my perspective, what has worked, what doesn't, what I have found very helpful. And personally, I like seeing a therapist for myself who aligns with my belief system. I think it's important. I think it's even more important for me if I'm going to a couples counselor. I think that the way that they view marriage and relationship with each other, like I think that that is important to me. So I totally get the importance of faith-based counseling in the mental health field. I'm just going to read off a few of these just like general views of what faith-based counseling is. Faith-based counseling is a form of therapy that integrates spiritual beliefs and principles with psychological methods to address and resolve various mental health issues. These approaches to counseling is very beneficial for individuals who find strength, guidance, and comfort in their faith and wish to incorporate these elements into their therapeutic journey. The foundations of faith-based counseling operates on a premise that an individual's spiritual beliefs can significantly influence their mental health and well-being. By acknowledging and incorporating those beliefs, counselors can offer more of a holistic and personalized support. I like that, personalized support. This type of counseling often involves prayer, scripture reading, and discussions about faith as part of the therapeutic process. I did find an article on Psychology Today. I don't know if you're familiar with Psychology Today, but a lot of contributors can write blog posts and then they will be approved by Psychology Today, which is a site where you can find therapists. I have my own profile on there, but I found one by Hara Estroff Morano, and she wrote a lot of articles on Psychology Today, and I enjoyed her more clinical view of faith-based counseling. And she wrote a post, and this is like a quote from that: mental health counseling is a form of help that can be tailored to many individual interests. Some mental health professionals make a point of incorporating spiritual or religious elements in their therapeutic processes. They do so because they primarily will serve a particular group or community, religious, faith-based community, because they themselves also adhere to a religious background or principles in their own life, because they feel they have a calling to help others. I thought that was a very good description of what faith-based counseling is. The benefits of faith-based counseling. So there's 4 that I listed that I could think of. So the fact that it's holistic, it's a lot more like we're dealing with things that are unseen, right? So we're dealing with emotions, we're dealing with the spiritual and the mental needs of the individual. So all 3 working together. I love that. This comprehensive approach can lead to more effective and long-lasting healing, unlike traditional counseling, which may focus primarily just on the mental health. Faith-based counseling addresses the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit, which I love that. Alignment with personal beliefs. Again, like I've said, I have benefited from going to counseling with those who share my belief system. For those deeply rooted in their faiths, more secular counseling method may seem incompatible. Faith-based counseling aligns therapeutic processes with the individual's religious beliefs, creating a more comfortable and relatable experience. This alignment can make clients more open and receptive to the counseling process, leading to better outcomes. Community and support. I have found this to be really, really helpful to lean into, because it is true, when you have a faith background, you do have this community that you can tap into, which is church community. And I think that there's a lot of resources. I mean, I think for new moms, there's always a lot of resources at a church. For kids, parenting, I think that the church community can really just thrive in helping those individuals who are parents. Many faith-based counselors are part of religious communities themselves, providing additional support networks for individuals, and these communities can offer further encouragement, understanding, and resources. Being part of a faith-based community can provide a sense of belonging and reduce feelings of isolation, which are often associated with mental health issues. I think that loneliness is detrimental to health in general and your mental health. Leaning into community and support is huge. I mean, I think about all those who got separated from their church because of COVID and just kind of got out of the rhythm. It happens. But I really do think that being plugged into a community of like-minded people who believe the same things as you, is really, really important and key. Finding a healthy church community is huge. I'm a big fan of smaller churches that are pouring into the community. I think that is a big green flag when it comes to church communities, when they're not so concerned about numbers and growth and doing the most with all the production, and they have a whole concert every Sunday. I think I'm a big fan of smaller churches that know what they're doing, want to pour into the community, and want to serve the people who do attend the church. I think that you will find more humble leaders in those churches, and not so much the narcissistic, crazy ones that we want to avoid at all costs. And, that's another thing. There's been a lot of Christian communities who've experienced the betrayal of a religious leader or, a pastor just doing the most and acting crazy, acting a fool. And that can be really hurtful and off-putting. Finding a smaller community that pours into those who attend and are able to actually have real connection and relationship is huge and can be very beneficial for your mental health. Having more of like ethical guidance can be beneficial. I would even argue that having a connection with, with a higher power, for us who are Christians, being able to know and have a relationship with Jesus is huge. It's number one. I do think that knowing your purpose, knowing that you're loved, knowing that you're unconditionally known by your Creator is super healing and can be very grounding as well. I didn't put this on the blog post. I may have to go back and update it because, again, I took this and did it very generically. I do think that I probably will make number 5 being able to be connected to your Creator, because I do think that that's very grounding. Common techniques that can be used in faith-based counseling. Again, this is just like most counselors using most of the techniques that we learn in grad school and in our internships, but here's just a few extras that may be used in faith-based counseling, using prayer and meditation, incorporating prayer into sessions. Again, these are things, if you want them in your sessions, you have to tell your Christian counselor. If they're a good ethical counselor, they will ask you permission if they want to bring in prayer, or they'll just leave it up to you. So you have to communicate what you want in your counseling session, because they are leaving it up to you. They do not want to make you, just like push you like that. Like, there's so many things that can happen when it comes to belief systems, and it's been abused. So, that's definitely not what a counselor wants to be doing. So communicate with your counselor. Using scripture during sessions. A counselor may reference a passage or be able to relate to the client's situation with a passage of scripture if that's what a client would like, providing a sense of direction and hope. If a client comes in, if you come in and you're talking to your counselor about a specific passage that you feel like was guiding you towards a life decision, it's really helpful for the counselor to be, aware of what that verse is, where it comes from, just be more aware of the Bible and theology as you are describing what is leading your life. Having community involvement, encouraging involvement in faith-based community activities can provide additional support and a sense of belonging. Participation in group activities such as worship service, study groups, or volunteer work can also enhance social connections and reinforce positive behaviors. Again, that's a very general description of faith-based counseling. Who can benefit from faith-based counseling? Obviously, those who have a strong connection to their faith and want to integrate it into therapy, are seeking guidance that aligns with their belief system, feel that traditional counseling methods do not fully address their spiritual needs. That one you got to be careful with. Because you do not, it can be very close to spiritual gaslighting. You don't want to jump over actual mental health issues by overly spiritualizing it. But it is good to bring in, your faith to those sessions. Processing what you do, what you don't like about your faith or Christianity. It's a really safe place in counseling to explore those things. And I do want to mention that the reason faith-based counseling is different from biblical counseling. Biblical counseling, you do not need to get your master's. It is not, there's not a licensure. There's not a whole lot of structure around it. Somebody could be a biblical counselor and they can get the certification, but there's no way to, through licensure, you can regulate who gets to be a counselor and who doesn't. And I think that that's a good thing. I think it protects individuals. I think it protects clients. On the other hand, I am not totally against biblical counseling. I think it definitely has its place. Some biblical counselors do use other counseling practices and techniques, but again, there's way less training in that. So their training is a lot in what biblical studies and like what passages of scripture to use for what and what does the Bible say about this life thing. So it can be really beneficial and it has its place, but it is so different from going to a professional licensed counselor. There's clinical professional licensed counselors who go through a board, who go through exams, who has a master's in counseling and mental health, and who uses actual tools that will help you reframe your brain, deal with anxiety, depression, all the things. And I think that is like just the best way to go. And so you can find a faith-based counselor who uses scripture, but also the mental health tools. And so that's the biggest, I think, difference, is that faith-based counseling or counselors are also LPC or LPCP, meaning that they are fully licensed through a board. They can, and there's like accountability for standard practices, where with biblical counselors, it's a little bit more loosey-goosey, okay? I'm sure there's a process and everything, but it's not a fully licensed counseling area. I would love to take some biblical counseling training someday because I think it's really interesting and I think it definitely has its place, but definitely different than faith-based counseling. And that is why. Faith-based counseling offers a unique and valuable approach to mental health care by integrating spiritual beliefs with psychological practices. For many, this form of therapy provides a more holistic, relatable, and effective way to address their mental and emotional well-being by aligning therapeutic methods with an individual's faith. Faith-based counseling can lead to profound and meaningful healing. In a world where mental health is becoming more and more important, faith-based counseling stands out as a compassionate and comprehensive approach. It respects and incorporates the deeply held beliefs of individuals, offering them a path to healing that is both meaningful and effective. Whether you're looking for guidance, comfort, or a deeper understanding of yourself and your faith, faith-based counseling could be the key to unlocking a healthier, more fulfilling life. So that is that. That is all the things about faith-based counseling. I hope that you enjoyed that and you were able to learn a little bit, just like I was able to learn a little bit more as I wrote this post. Again, this is just one method of or a way to describe Christian counseling, but faith-based is a lot more. It can be more encompassing and it can incorporate other religions. With that in mind, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. In closing, I just want to put it out there that I continually reassess how I think Christianity can be used in counseling. And it changes based on every single individual that I interact with. I am constantly asking that question because, quite honestly, I get a lot of questions from individuals outside of therapy. So these are individuals who probably haven't been to counseling before and are a little bit more curious about, hey, how does my faith work? Or how does my faith fit into the mold of mental health, the mental health space? And I do want to mention that the best way I can describe mental health and the relation it has in faith is the same as maybe the physical body, the physical health has in a place of faith. So if you are, a lot of my family members are nurses, and I always like to say that I didn't like blood, and that's why I went into mental health field. But if you are a nurse who's a Christian, it's kind of the same thing in my mind. If you're a counselor who's a Christian, it doesn't really change a whole lot in your day-to-day. I think that is good. I mean, I think a lot of times spirituality and mental health get lumped in together. Like you want them to be more involved, but at the end of the day, Mental health is filled with techniques and tools, just like in the world of health, right? If you're going to a nutritionist, if you're going to someone who's holistic and, wants to check your hormones or something like that, like they have actual techniques. And yes, prayer does change things. I think they are linked, and spirituality and our faith and our Christian belief systems can impact the physical and mental health of our bodies. But at the same time, there are some specific techniques that people can learn and grow in, have more healing from, because it's a tool, right? Just like I do a lot of breathing exercises to help with my blood pressure. And that is something that has been a huge tool for me. And next week, I'm going to meet with a group of people who really take their prayer and spirituality seriously, and they want to pray over me and my blood pressure situation. Me being aware of both of those things being important in my healing process is a good representation of how mental health can be a great tool, but it doesn't necessarily need to be separate from my faith, if that makes sense. So just in the same way that someone who is studying to become a doctor or a nurse or something like that, who is a Christian, it's the same thing when you're studying to be a mental health counselor. It's very, very similar. It doesn't need to, I don't just believe that you're going to pray and your anxiety is going to go away, right? And the same way as for your physical, I don't just believe that if you pray, all of a sudden your blood pressure is going to go down. Like that could happen and that would be great, but there's also other things. Like I'm on medication. I'm doing a breathing monitor. I'm trying to eat healthier. I am limiting caffeine. There's other things too along with it. When we talk about faith-based counseling, it's a beautiful way to incorporate your faith into the mental health field, because I get this question a lot. And I also feel the hesitancy with a lot of Christians about the mental health field. Like, where does that fit into my faith and my belief system? I think it fits really well, just like going to the doctor fits really well into your faith and belief system. So I hope that helps. I hope that answers some of your questions and that it was relatable content. It can be a little tricky, so thank you for listening all the way through and for hearing out my perspective on faith-based counseling and where faith can belong in the mental health field. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give it a share, like it on YouTube. Make sure that you're already subscribed to whatever podcast app you like to use. And I really appreciate all of you joining in and listening and being a part of this community. And if you like mental health tips, if you enjoy talking about the hard things in theology, and if you love to learn more about how to have more wellness in your life, don't miss our next episode. It is going to be how to get out of a conflict cycle in your relationship. We're going to use some EFT, which is emotionally focused therapy, and we're going to talk about some of those principles and the benefits of that kind of therapy and talking about your emotions with your significant other, your spouse, your partner. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So don't miss it. Make sure you're subscribed, and I will see you in the next episode. God's got you, and you are covered.